A few days ago, the Wall Street Journal declared victory on inflation, writing that, quote, the global fight against inflation has turned a corner. Meaning, cue the green light for the Fed to slash rates and get back to its day job, pumping inflation as high as voters will tolerate. As Lawrence Lepard put it, quote, money print to go brr very soon. The journal is going off recent readings in the US, UK, and Eurozone, all pointing to flat headline inflation on the month. I mentioned a few days ago that this is overwhelmingly driven by energy and by declines in household durables like used cars, clothes, and furniture, which together suggest that the tame inflation is not coming from our omniscient central banking overlords. It is driven by incoming recession. After all, recessions hit those very prices dead on. In the 2008 crisis, oil fell from $150 a barrel all the way down to $25. In the 2001 recession, it dropped in half, as it did in every recession since the late 1970s. The journal actually notes this fact, saying that the European Union is on the brink of recession, while the US and UK economies are stagnant, but somehow the penny does not drop. Why? Because there's a narrative to sell here, people. Wall Street is like an addict jonesing for that next hit of easy money. They need rates to come down so they can get back to draining your life savings. Indeed, the journal lovingly quotes a former central banker, spinning up the one-month numbers with, quote, it's definitely a turning point for inflation. Investors may be surprised how rapidly central banks cut rates, end quote. It's worth noting all these victory dances are coming from a single month's print, in the US anyway. As Peter Schiff has noted, single months are meaningless, especially given the incentives that government statisticians have to report prices accurately. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained. What's next is it is well known that there is a lag on interest rate hikes, which are the main tools that central banks use to strangle economies to get inflation down. The general rule of thumb is there's around 18 months between rate hikes and economic impact. Indeed, that same journal article mentions the lag, so you'd expect falling inflation during that period simply because the economy is getting strangled. In fact, the Fed did not actually hit the level of traditionally restrictive interest rates until literally 3 months ago, so in August. So not 18 months, but 3 months. Meaning it is way too early to know the impact of interest rates, whether they've done enough or, in fact, if they've overshot. In other words, they are chasing shadows. They're chasing a single month's shadow, a shadow on which depends the entire global economy. It's very irresponsible, of course. But then remember, the purpose of the central bank is to pump out as much inflation as the people will bear. My favorite metaphor is a gasoline thief who steals the most his neighbors won't notice. In which case, it's not irresponsible to be grubbing excuses to inflate. It is literally their job. As for what comes next, I think the Fed and its media peanut gallery are doing everything they can to get back to printing as soon as possible. They'll gaslight, they'll lie, they'll do whatever it takes. This week's newsletter talks about this exact process, how an early declaration of victory over inflation in the 70s led to a near decade of stagflation. Check it out at profsatange.com. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.